that's your 1982 pivot. So if you see that 40-year cycle, right, this was a Jupiter-Saturn cross right in here. So you can kind of see how there's, like these are the big ones, the big, 40-year cycle, boom and boom, and somewhere in there. And then we had sort of the dot-com peak, sort of the absolute peak of the, maybe we'll make that like teal. This is the peak of the dot-com boom, somewhere right in here. So this is what I say is like, this is the, for these particular ones, this is the greed cycle. This is the fear cycle. So this is the baby boomers going into the workforce, working. And of course, at the same time, we also had the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that sure helped sort of inflation, deflation. We also had sort of the end of sort of the socialist movement. And, since this time period, it's been all about screw the workers, outsourcing, right sizing, blah, 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 politically correct wording is basically you workers. And then this is the baby boomers going into their retirement. And there's that's basically the whole baby boomers life cycle here. Entering the workforce, working their butts off, then trying to plan for retirement. Now they're off. Now the millennials will take over and they should do the same thing. Interesting thing is probably this looks the exact opposite, right? So we could, I don't know how you do that, but we could technically just do a, I don't know, let's see what happens. I don't know whether this will work or not, but it might. We go our pattern and go roughly something like that to there. And then we'll flip that around. There you go, something that looks like that. There's our future. And interesting, you can see the whole sort of history of humanity. So interestingly enough, I don't really actually think that this next, and this should come about roughly 10 years from now, 1930, somewhere in that area. I don't think that this this next cycle is going to be as nasty. Or somebody can find out where the so why does that not look right? 21, 36. Oh, that's 20 years. That's why. Oh, so these are the this is the Jupiter Saturn crosses actually. So roughly there, right? And then this one here. So really where I would be worried about our sort of Western civilization is actually over here. This is where it's going to get really ugly. So interestingly enough, actually through this period here, and I've often talked about this should be what's what they would call normalizing interest rates. Like we were in this weird sort of pocket of space and time. Kind of like here. I mean, through this environment, it was just crazy. I mean, double-digit interest rates and stuff. And, literally every single day, double-digit inflation numbers. People, you guys have just gotten used to sort of double-digit. Just to imagine if it was just relentless and it just went on year after year after year. Right now, I think that we had this health crisis, which has sort of artificially injected a bit of inflation into the picture. But as soon as that health crisis wanes, I think that a lot of this inflation that we're seeing right now actually unwinds. Also, too, China has a major problem on their hands right now with this ridiculous real estate bubble bursting. So the question you have to ask yourself, first off, there's some sort of deal they did with the devil there 20 years ago, ironically enough, actually through this transition period here to try and keep U.S. inflation relatively tame and, the outsourcing, downsizing, all that bullshit. The U.S. government knew that the demographic situation in the United States was really bad and structurally they were in trouble and they needed like 20 years to get through to the next generation. So they went and did some sort of crazy deal with the Chinese, let them peg their currency to the US dollar. I have a feeling there's probably some very specific date or something that they did with the deal to keep it that way. Because I noticed through all of this sort of political wrangle and stuff, nobody said boo about that peg. And that would be the one very easy way for the United States to bring China right back down to earth, is say, I'm sorry, we're not going to honor the peg anymore. And I believe that the Chinese economy would implode. But it's not the case. So as a result, nothing's happening. It's kind of sad for the Chinese people. I hear stories that they're actually like bolting doors shut, and people are literally being like bolted into their houses. Like, this is insanity. And the worst part about it is I thought we as a species actually were beyond this shit. I actually thought, stupid me, in this lifetime, because I was so programmed in the late 19th century, I guess the late 20th century, I was so programmed that, oh no, through, the evolution of nuclear weapons and stuff, that something like World War III can't happen anymore. It's impossible. Yeah, well, that's a good one. Anyway, so there's sort of your long-term forecast for interest rates. And interestingly enough, this would be the exact opposite of that image. In essence, interest rates working their way back up, because this is if you're not familiar with this orange line is the euro dollar contract. And I often just sort of assume that you guys understand this stuff, but probably a lot of you don't. My favorite sort of third-party site to track futures markets is this place called futurestradingcharts.com. I always like these guys. I've been visiting their website forever. Interest rate financial futures. So here's 2-year Treasury notes. That's a U.S. government guaranteed paper. 30-day Fed funds. This is actually paper that's guaranteed by this cartel of bankers. It has nothing to do with the U.S. government, which is a little scary. And you notice that, in all of our studies and stuff recently, you see me make reference to things like the Fed spread, because now we don't know. We know, like, it used to be called the TED spread, where we would compare T-bills, U.S. Treasury bills, with the euro dollar market, which is the corporate interest rate market. And because the T-bills would be guaranteed. Well, great financial crisis. Turns out T-bills are worthless. U.S. government's bankrupt. So we had to switch to this cartel of bankers. Notice, hey, where did the T-bills go? U.S. government is insolvent, folks. The banksters now run our society. I mean, that's an interesting sort of commentary that I don't think a lot of people in the public have picked up on. And no, they're a quasi government agency. Sure. Yeah, right. You look in the fine print. No, they're not. They are a private consortium. They are a cartel. They are an association of the 1%. And, ironically enough, to a certain degree, a huge portion of this quote unquote Fed funds and Federal Reserve Board is actually people that are not even American. They're, the Rothschilds owned a huge chunk of JP Morgan's ass. The interesting thing is you wonder, this is a great sort of story of history. What does it mean when you see somebody has a big sort of distorted nose? I guess even like that, especially if you see it really pockmark. I don't know whether you can see that or not. But that's actually a telltale sign of an alcoholic. If you ever see like alcoholics, got like a lot older alcoholic dudes, man, they got the biggest fucking noses in the world. It's crazy. I'm not quite sure why it goes that way, but if anything, it makes a lot of sense why JP Morgan had a schnoz the way he did. And the funny thing is when he died, Vanderbilt actually was reading his obituary, and he's like, "Holy, I didn't realize that JP Morgan was such a poor guy." Because it turns out that JP Morgan actually was all full of bluster, and he was the front man for the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds actually wanted to work their way in and, take revenge on the American independence movement, because they basically told the Brits to go F themselves. And all the, Rothschilds owned the Bank of England. And man, it took them about 150 years or so, but they worked their way right back in. And now they basically, since 1913, the Rothschilds now control American society. Try telling an American that. Oh, they don't like to hear that. But.